You're listening to the Journey podcast. Do you know someone with endometriosis, or are you struggling with it yourself? Stay tuned for a compassionate and informative conversation on this debilitating condition. This episode contains adult subject matter and listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Today is part of Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, and this is a special bonus episode. Endometriosis is a common and often misunderstood condition that affects many women worldwide. It occurs when the tissue that normally lines the inside of the uterus grows outside of it, causing pain and discomfort. Endometriosis can be a debilitating and isolating condition to live with, and with the right support and care, it is possible to manage the symptoms and live a fulfilling life. In this episode, we explore the topic of endometriosis and its impact on women's health and well-being. Our guest shares her personal experience with endometriosis and provides insights on how to recognize the symptoms and find help. We discuss the importance of self-advocacy and building a support system, as well as research and treatments for endometriosis. Alyssa Chavez is an endo and infertility warrior turned nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner. She helps women through her Thrive with Endo one-on-one coaching program to get to the root cause of their endo symptoms or infertility by healing from the inside out, and is so passionate about helping women to be able to live their life to its fullest and truly be able to achieve their dreams. Let's meet Alyssa Chavez. Hi, Alyssa. It's so great to have you on the podcast. We will be exploring an often difficult and sensitive topic in this episode that affects millions of women globally. And you are here to share about endometriosis and fertility today. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Petra. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to share about this topic and hopefully connect with some other women out there who are going through similar things.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you. And I think this is such an important topic to highlight because often a lot of women suffer in silence. So I'm very, very happy to talk about that and talk a little bit about what it's like and your story as well. So let's get started. And do you want to share a little bit about yourself and your own story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of the many cases of endometriosis that went for many years undiagnosed. I think in a large part because I had never really even heard of endometriosis before I had received a diagnosis, or at least a hint of a possibility of a diagnosis, since I had to wait until much later when I went in for a laparoscopic surgery to get an official diagnosis. But it was one of the typical stories, I suppose, where I was having a lot of symptoms like really extreme period pain and some different gut symptoms and fatigue and infertility. And I just didn't really, realize that a lot of that stuff, first of all, was even an issue in the first place, because so much of that stuff is just normalized, especially when it comes to period pain. It's one of those things we're almost taught as young women to just kind of suck it up and get on with your life. And I had that mentality. So I actually never even went to see a doctor about it for years and years and years. It wasn't until I was married and my husband and I were trying to start a family and were struggling with that I decided to go and see a fertility specialist. And she was actually the first one to mention to me the possibility of endometriosis. She had done a pelvic ultrasound and seen what looked like an endometrioma on my ovary, which it turned out it was later on when I had my surgery. And that was really the first time I had even heard that term before, or even thought that that was a possibility. So I went home still not really knowing much about it, other than that it was, at least I had a reason for the challenges I was having getting pregnant and all of that. And I ended up doing a whole lot of research on my own, just learning about what it is and what it entails, and reassuring my husband that it's not necessarily a life threatening disease, but that it does have a large effect on your life. And I slowly started to piece together that so many of these different symptoms that I was experiencing were actually related to endometriosis, which in a way it was kind of a relief just to know that at least I can understand why all of this is happening to my body. Because I mean, at the time in my late 20s, I was having just crippling fatigue and pain when I was on my cycles, and just things that you shouldn't be experiencing ever, but especially at such a young age. And I just felt like I needed support on a deeper level, I guess, than what I was finding within the medical community. I just didn't want to have to rely on medications and things like that for the rest of my life in order to feel good. So I started really digging into holistic health and nutrition and gut health and all these different avenues that have really become the center of my life at this point. And it's been life changing for me. I mean, my journey has gone from being in all this pain and fatigue and so many gut symptoms and things, digestive symptoms and bowel symptoms and things that I would have never thought were remotely related, just are completely gone at this point in my life. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful that I found this journey that I've been on these last few years of my life. And I just love now to share that with other women so that hopefully you can feel empowered and maybe inspired to go and find help in some way to support your own body and your own healing journey.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And what a journey it has been for you. And how did you even first figure out? So you went to see a fertility specialist, but before that, you didn't even know that endometriosis was a possibility, correct?
Right.
hmm So, how would listeners know to go and see someone for help if they're suspecting endometriosis? What are some of the telltale symptoms, a sign, something they could look out for, since this seems to be maybe even underdiagnosed and not much talked about? So, how would someone know?
Yeah, it's absolutely underdiagnosed and under talked about. And I think that's a large part of why we're here today. I think the biggest thing with that is just understanding what really is normal for your body. Because I think that that's what I ran into. And I think that's something that so many other women run into, is just that we have this understanding growing up of what quote unquote normal is. And that often is that period pain is normal and PMS symptoms are normal, and having these mood swings and fatigue and all of these things are just considered normal because so many people experience it. So I think the first thing is just to have an awareness of what a truly healthy body and menstrual cycle should look like. And what that really is a period that's really virtually, if not completely, pain free, to have no PMS symptoms. During your period, you might have a little bit of a lower energy level and maybe a little bit lower mood than normal just because of the drop in hormones, but it shouldn't be this huge fluctuation, much less things like having pain with bowel movements or having pain with urination or pain with intercourse. Those are also really common with endometriosis. And I don't know, it may be one of those things that maybe women are a little shy to talk about or even to discuss with their doctor, much less friends and family. I mean, it's probably not something I would have gone up to my mom and said, "Hey, does it hurt when you poop?" You know?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a big part of it, is just understanding what the symptoms of endometriosis are and how to look for those red flags of what's normal and what's not, and when to go and seek help. I think a big part of that, honestly, is really truly listening to your own intuition, because I know if I look back over the years, there was a lot of talking to myself of like, nah, this is fine. I'm sure this is okay. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm young and healthy. And there was a lot of kind of talking myself out of what I knew intuitively to myself, which was that there's something out of balance. There's something like not quite right. And I think I maybe just didn't know who to go to or where to begin. And so I ended up just not really doing anything about it.
hmm
So I think just for women out there who may be listening to this, just really take a look at what's going on in your body and listening to that intuition. Do you feel like something's a little off? Because you are the biggest expert in your own body. You always will be. So if you feel like something's off, even if you've gone to doctors before and haven't gotten answers or have been told that everything is fine, that's the time when it's totally okay to look for another doctor or another practitioner or another somebody out there who can really listen to you and find those answers that you need.
That's a really good point. So let's talk a little bit about what endometriosis is like physically. What happens when you have endometriosis? What happens in your body?
Yeah. So, what endometriosis really is, it's when tissue that's similar to the tissue that grows within your uterus each month, that endometrial lining. There's tissue that's similar to that that ends up growing in other places, usually within your abdomen. So it can grow on the outsides of your ovaries or the outside of your uterus or on your bowels, your bladder. And along with that, it can end up creating these adhesions, which can, in many cases, actually fuse organs together, where they end up being stuck together and pulled out of place, and all kinds of crazy physical things can happen in there. That was actually part of my story as well. When I went in for my surgery, they discovered that I had a whole bunch of things stuck together in there. I had ovaries stuck to my uterus, and bowels were stuck to my uterus, and bladder was stuck to my uterus. Everything was just kind of all stuck together in there. And that can
Wow.
also be part of the pain that you experience with this physical adhesions going on. That's really what is happening in your body. There's been a lot of study as to why exactly it starts and what causes it in the first place. And there doesn't seem to be one single conclusion that the world has come to as of yet. But what
Mhm.
does seem to be prevalent in the studies and the science behind it is that there is some sort of an immune dysfunction component. Because basically, they think that that happens to many women where you get that tissue kind of loose in your body, but that your immune system cleans it up. And so in the case of endometriosis, it's not doing that, right? It's kind of just leaving
Okay.
these lesions to grow and cause these issues and things like that. And of course, when there's an immune dysfunction, then this leads to inflammation. And that's a huge piece with endometriosis is that chronic inflammation in your body. And that can be also a huge contributor to the pain and fatigue and other symptoms like that that we experience.
hmm Wow. And if someone thinks that they might have endometriosis, what is a good first point of contact? Or is there someone specialized that they should contact? Can they contact just their general family doctor? Or who would be the best point of contact to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you certainly could go to your family doctor or an OBGYN, but it's always a matter of whether or not they have experience with it or have a lot of familiarity with it. If you really heavily suspect endometriosis, I would actually really recommend going to somebody who specializes in that area. There are actually many doctors in the world who have that as their specialty. There are doctors who focus on doing the excision surgeries, which is kind of considered the gold standard as far as medical care that actually goes in there. It's a laparoscopic surgery where they actually remove the disease from your body. And there are several, at least a couple of resources that can be really helpful for connecting with one of those doctors. So there's a group called Nancy's Nook, which they have a website as well as a Facebook group where you can connect with endometriosis specialists. And then there's also a website called I Care Better that you can also go in and kind of search in your area. And they have doctors all over the world. So that's always a good place to start because I feel like it just gives you a good idea of where you are just to have that diagnosis. So you're not just guessing or wondering forever, but to have that diagnosis and to receive that medical care if you need that.
And as you mentioned before, you also saw doctors and you couldn't find an answer. So it seems to be that you can definitely have contact with a doctor and not be diagnosed with it and still be searching for answers without actually getting that diagnosis of endometriosis. So it would be very important to actually see a specialist who can help you with that.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, so after you had the surgery to remove and unstick some of the tissues, does it return or does it actually stay healed? And let's say that the physical part that they performed the surgery on?
Well, that can be very individual. And that's actually where a lot of my journey into the holistic world has come in, because I'm a firm believer that we need a good balance of both the Western medicine and the holistic support, right?
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer that the holistic support can be a huge help in preventing the disease from coming back. I know there are women out there who have one surgery and you never have to go back again. And I've also talked to many women who have had many surgeries. I've talked to women who have had as many as a dozen surgeries over the years. I really believe in really taking a look at your body as a whole and how things are functioning and getting to the root of what's going on. So, if there is some sort of an immune dysfunction and there is some sort of inflammation happening in your body, really trying to pinpoint where exactly that may be coming from. Because if you're not working on all of that from the source, from the root of what's going on in your body, then it is very possible that the disease can start to grow again and you may end up right back in square one in the future. And that can be very discouraging and disheartening for women.
Hmm. Yeah, I can only just imagine how that would affect you. And what kind of impact did this have on your mental and emotional health? How were you coping with that as you were journeying through that?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge under talked about piece as well. We talk a lot, I think both in the medical world and in the holistic world, we talk a lot about the physical pieces of endometriosis, whether it's the actual growth of the disease or the imbalances that may be happening physically in your body. But that's a piece that I feel like could use some more discussion just so that women maybe even just don't feel so alone. And yeah, speaking for myself, it's another one of those things that I feel like I didn't even realize I was having mental health struggles until it started to improve. And I started to look back and realize, wow, I really was going through depression each month. I mean, when I was on my period in particular, I know that mood swings and things like that, again, are fairly common amongst women. But when you're going through pain that is so extreme, like mine was, where I physically couldn't stand up straight for several days at the beginning of each period, I would be hunched over, hands on knees. And that's if I could even get up and walk around. I was largely either couch or bed bound on those days. I remember times when I was even trying to go up the stairs of my own house and I would have to rest 4 or 5 times on the way up. It's a 2-story house, mind you. It's not like I have miles of stairs to go up or anything. To be somebody who generally feels strong and youthful and full of life, to all of a sudden be reduced to I can't walk up the stairs of my own house, it's very emotional. It's very disheartening. I remember one day it took me probably 15 minutes to get down the stairs to my kitchen because I needed, I don't know, water or something. I got there and just laid my head down on the kitchen counter and just started bawling my eyes out because I was so exhausted from the pain and
Yeah.
just tired of dealing with it. My poor husband comes over just freaking out, thinking that was, there was something very, very wrong, which I suppose there was. And I think that that's another one that's very, very common, not to mention that it can be a very lonely journey because if I mentioned to anybody, any other women that I knew in my life, friends or family or anything like that, that I was having period pain, so many people would be, oh, yeah, yeah, me too. I have cramps. But the level that it goes to with endometriosis is just, it's a whole other level. I mean, people compare it to labor pains, and it's considered one of the top 20 most painful conditions in the world. It's no joke. And your typical over the counter pain medications just don't do anything, at least for me. So it just feels like there's nothing you can do in the moment. And it causes just so much stress and anxiety. And just you wonder sometimes if you're dying. Like, is my body so far gone that something's just so out of balance and wrong with this situation? And it just causes so much stress. And like I said, just that loneliness of, am I the only one who experiences this? Am I the only one who has this level of pain and fatigue and all these different things? And again, that's why I really have made it my mission to share my story with as many women as possible and talk to people about it, because that's just, I think, a huge part of it is just knowing that there are other women out there who are going through similar things and that there is support out there and there are people we can connect with who truly understand our journeys.
Mhm. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that so openly, which, like you said, is such an important part of getting the word out and highlighting what happens and what can be done when you have endometriosis. And by the sounds of it, you did find some things outside of surgery that also helped you, some holistic approaches. And do you want to highlight some of what you found that helped?
Yeah, absolutely. My journey with that really started off first with nutrition. That was my first dipping my toes into this world. And even the changes I've made through diet, through nutrition, have just been huge for my body. And I'm one of those people that once I learn one thing, I have to learn more. So I've dug deeper and deeper and deeper after that. But even just the nutrition changes just really, to make it super simple for people listening to this, because of course the nutrition piece can be really tailored to your body. We're all very unique, but there are pieces that really work for everybody, which are just really focusing in on whole foods, staying away from your processed packaged foods as much as possible, because those tend to contain ingredients that can contribute to the inflammation that we have in our bodies, especially things like vegetable oils, your canola oil and corn oil and all of those hydrogenated oils that you see on in packaged foods. Sugar, of course, is a huge one, which comes in many, many forms, just full, natural sugar and all of the processed forms of sugar, especially if you're looking at packaged goods, anything that ends in the letters OSE, like fructose or sucrose, those are all forms of sugar. And that's one of those things that can also really contribute to the inflammation in your body, which, when we're talking inflammation, again, that's really the big thing that causes the pain and fatigue and things like that we experience. So staying away from the foods that are going to be more inflammatory and focusing instead on filling your plate with these foods that are going to be nourishing to your body and actually add nutrients that are beneficial for us is huge. So that's going to be things like, your good whole food sources of protein, your poultry and meat and seafood and things like that. Eggs are a really great one. Eating all kinds of different fruits and vegetables. I like to say eat the rainbow, but not so much the Skittles, right?
Yes.
Just all the colors, your green fruits and veggies, and purple and orange and red and blue and white, and just every color you can think of, because each unique food has its own unique nutrients in it. And the more nutrients that we have, the better our body is able to function the way that it needs to. Because basically, the way that our body functions, really, when you're looking at anything, when you're looking at the way your digestive system works and your reproductive system and the way that your body regulates hormones and blood sugar and all of that, everything needs nutrients in order to work. It's kind of like how we have to put fuel in our car in order for it to drive, right? We can't expect it to just turn on an empty tank. And it's the
Mhm.
same with our bodies. The more that we pour those wonderful nutrients into our bodies, the better that our bodies are able to perform the functions that it's meant to perform in a healthy way. So that was really the first piece that I discovered. And I started out by making small changes here and there, and just I started noticing a difference, from one cycle to the next, and started getting more energy. And that just gave me momentum to want to do more of it and try more things and learn more about my body. And that's when I started really getting into deeper things like gut health. And that's really been a big part of my journey as well. And I've really, really found a place of just deep healing in my body that I'm so incredibly thankful for.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And those are some great tips for our listeners on where they could start their healing journey as well, if they suspect or if they've been diagnosed with endometriosis. And it sounds like it can be a very difficult journey going from not knowing that endometriosis could even be a possibility to maybe getting the wrong diagnosis or no diagnosis to finding out what's wrong, possibly having surgery, and then having to manage this for the rest of your life. So, how can women become empowered around health with something like endometriosis?
That is a great question. And I'm actually even super happy with the way that you just asked that, because empowerment is one of those words that I find myself really gravitating towards. And just speaking from my own personal journey, the empowerment piece for me really came in from knowing that there was something that I could do to help myself, right? Because things like, obviously, something like going in for surgery, you're never going to do that for yourself. Even if you knew how, that wouldn't work out, right?
Mhm.
It can feel a little or a lot for me disempowering, I guess is the best word I can think of, to feel like you have to rely on medications and things like that and just kind of taking the doctor's word for it and just taking whatever medications they recommend that oftentimes leave you feeling worse in many ways. Even if
Mhm.
they will help directly the endometriosis symptoms, they come with a lot of side effects and things like that. I was on a medication at one point in time where it actually puts your body into a sort of menopause, like a medicated menopause. And
Oh.
again, I was in my late 20s, maybe I was 30 by then, but still young, very young for that. And I went through several months of menopause symptoms. I went full on hot flashes and wasn't having a period and dry skin, just all these things that I didn't think I was going to have to deal with for many years. And I finally just had to say, okay, that's enough. I'm never going to do that particular medication again. I have really found empowerment through finding these ways that I can help my own body, just making those decisions every day of what I'm putting on my plate, because I know that that makes an impact on my body and it's a way that I can actually help myself, as well as doing things like making sure that I move my body a little bit every day. It doesn't mean I'm going to work out at the gym for an hour every day. It's not to that level, though for some people that may work, but just going on walks every day. I have dogs, so that gives me a good excuse anyway. I love doing yoga. That's something I've done for many years and gives me a way to move my body. And it's another thing that can be really beneficial for my body for what it's going through. And it makes me feel empowered to know that that's something that I can do to help myself. And even things as simple as staying well hydrated throughout the day, because that's another big piece. Making sure that I'm feeding my body on a regular basis and not going too long without meals, because I know that keeping my blood sugar stable is a huge piece as far as keeping all my hormones balanced and things like that to help me feel good, and making sure that my plate is well balanced with protein and healthy fats and fruits and vegetables and things like that. I also like to drink a cup of green tea every day, and that is a great source of antioxidants, which is also really, really beneficial for endometriosis. So it's all these little things, little choices that I make each day. Getting enough sleep at night is another big one.
Mhm.
And for me, for my own journey, that's something that's really made me feel empowered, is just feeling like there are things that I can do and ways that I can actually take my health into my own hands and feel like I'm in control of my own body and like my body's not in control of me and I don't have to rely on medications if I don't want to. I can make these choices that make me feel good both physically and emotionally and mentally. I just feel so much more at peace at this point in my life. And that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also very important for your overall well being that you have a sense of being an advocate for your own health. I would imagine that helps as well. Now, do you want to go over some of your programs and services so that listeners can get an idea of how they could connect with you if they wanted to work with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So currently, I have a one on one coaching program, which is called my Thrive with Endo program. That's another one of those words that I just love, thrive, because it is very much possible with endometriosis. So I do a lot of that nutrition work that I was talking about. We really dig in and figure out what foods are going to be most nourishing for your unique body. I do a lot of work with looking at specific signs and symptoms that your body is showing you. I use a program called the Nutritional Assessment Questionnaire that really digs into some very specific little symptoms in your body and can give us a good picture of, where there might be imbalances. And I actually also like to use functional testing to help to take a look at what is going on in your gut, because gut health is another huge thing. Things like if you have dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in bacteria in your gut, or even parasites and fungi and all those lovely things that can live in your gut, those imbalances can actually be a huge contributor to that immune dysfunction and inflammation. So healing that part can be a big piece for helping to really find that root cause and get to that point of being able to really heal your body. So that's another piece that I actually really like to use is I use a stool test as well as a food sensitivity test to really figure out what may be triggering these things in your body. And we use that to create a very bio-individual protocol to help to heal your body and get you to a point where you can actually thrive and live the life you want to live and get to a point of actually being pain-free and full of energy and nice balanced hormones and all of that great stuff.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we will be linking to all of Alyssa's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there for all the links on how you can get in touch with her if you'd like to work with her and you've been inspired by this episode. And this has been another incredible episode. And I hope our listeners have connected with your personal story, Alyssa. And it has been wonderful chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're so welcome. It's been wonderful chatting with you as well.
Thank you so much and take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please subscribe, share on social media, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and the Journey blog. Sending you love and courage, and see you next week.